What if a weeping statue, a failed papal assassination, and the most controversial prophecy of the 20th century were all connected by a single red thread of blood? This isn't fiction. This is the real story of how Fatima, Rome, and a tiny Italian town named Civitavecchia became spiritually entangled in one of the most mysterious chapters in modern Catholic history. At the center of it all, a humble plaster statue of the Virgin Mary, one that would, inexplicably, begin to cry tears of blood. This thread, both literal and symbolic, leads directly to the heart of one of the most powerful and beloved pontificates of all time, that of Pope John Paul II. But today's story isn't just about a statue. It's about a pope's private faith, a Vatican secret still unrecognized by the institutional church, and the final, chilling warning from the Mother of God herself. It all began on a quiet winter day, February 2nd, 1995, in the sleepy seaside town of Civitavecchia, just northwest of Rome. In the backyard of the Gregori family, a small Madonna statue brought from Medjugorje stood silently among the flowers. But that silence would soon be shattered. Jessica, the Gregoris' 6-year-old daughter, was the first to see it. Running breathlessly to her father, she cried out, "Daddy! Daddy! The little Madonna is crying!" Fabio Gregori, a hard-working electrician and no stranger to skepticism, thought she must be imagining things. But when he went outside to look, he froze. From the statue's eyes flowed streaks of crimson. It wasn't paint. It wasn't condensation. It was blood. The phenomenon didn't stop there. Over the next 4 days, the statue reportedly wept blood 14 times. Witnesses included neighbors, priests, and even the local bishop, Girolamo Grillo. The events defied logic, and yet they unfolded before dozens of stunned onlookers. Then came March 15th, 1995, a date now etched in church lore. Bishop Grillo was holding the statue in his hands when it happened again. This time, the blood flowed directly into his palms. There were no cameras, no sleight of hand, just silent, undeniable mystery. Laboratory analysis confirmed the blood was human, and despite rigorous investigation, no natural explanation could be found. The Diocesan Commission, which included renowned Capuchin theologian Father Flavio Ubodi, eventually conceded. The weeping was scientifically unexplainable, but the tears were just the beginning. From July 1995 to May 1996, the Gregori family, particularly Fabio and little Jessica, reported over 90 apparitions of the Virgin Mary. With each apparition came messages, prophetic ones, directed not only to the church, but to the entire world. The town was shaken. National media descended. Pilgrims flocked to Civitavecchia in droves, and the statue was moved to the Church of St. Augustine, where it is still honored to this day. Yet beneath all the public attention, another layer of mystery unfolded quietly behind Vatican walls. Because this wasn't just another Marian phenomenon. It deeply affected one man in particular, John Paul II, the same pope who had narrowly survived an assassination attempt on May 13, 1981, the exact anniversary of the first Fatima apparition. The same pope who had consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. His Marian devotion was well known. But what few people realized was that this pope believed in the Civitavecchia statue from the very beginning. According to credible witnesses and documents compiled by Father Ubodi, John Paul II saw the Madonna of Civitavecchia not just as a sign, but as a divine warning. So much so that in 1995 the statue was secretly transported to the Vatican. There, the Pope alone and away from cameras knelt before it, He prayed. And then, in a gesture known only to a few, he crowned the weeping Madonna with his own hands. 5 years later, in the Jubilee year 2000, he would make another profound gesture, a formal act of entrustment to Our Lady of Civitavecchia. But what exactly was he entrusting? What did he fear or foresee? Because the story doesn't end with weeping. It deepens with prophecy, cover-ups, and a question the Vatican still refuses to answer. But before we move on, ask yourself, what would it take for a pope to secretly crown a statue the Church hasn't officially approved? And why would he do it in the shadows? So why would a pope, known for his theological rigor and spiritual depth, secretly crown a statue that cries blood? The answer, as we now discover, lies in a series of gestures, private, solemn, and deeply moving, that reveal just how personal this mystery became for John Paul II. According to Bishop Girolamo Grillo, the Pope's silent coronation of the Civitavecchia statue wasn't simply an act of devotion. It was a direct response to a request from the Virgin Mary herself, conveyed through the little girl who first saw the statue weep, Jessica Gregori. And the connection didn't end there. In 2005, during his final days in the Gemelli Hospital, gravely ill and approaching the end of his earthly journey, John Paul II received a letter. It was from Jessica, now a teenager, who wrote to him about a secret message the Virgin had entrusted to her. A message linked to the Third Secret of Fatima, one meant only for the Pope. The Vatican's Secretariat of State responded on his behalf, but the tone was unmistakable. The bond between John Paul II and Civitavecchia was sacred, enduring, and deeply felt. There was yet another symbolic gesture that speaks volumes. Father Luciano Pescatori, the keeper of the Pope's relics, handed the Gregori family a cloth stained with the very blood from the 1981 assassination attempt, the same attempt that John Paul II believed the Virgin of Fatima had saved him from. That blood-soaked cloth was more than a relic. It was a silent offering, a tribute from a pope to the Madonna of Civitavecchia. But why? Why did he believe so strongly in this particular sign? Because for John Paul II, Civitavecchia wasn't just another Marian apparition. It was Fatima continued, a prophetic echo of 1917, updated for a world on the brink. He saw in the Madonna's tears a call to repentance, a warning to the Church, and an urgent plea to a world slipping into spiritual crisis. To understand this connection, we must revisit the hills of Fatima, Portugal, in 1917. There, the Virgin Mary appeared to 3 shepherd children, Lucia, Francisco, and Jacinta, and delivered 3 secrets, terrifying visions of hell, a plea for Russia to be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart, and a mysterious prophecy about a bishop in white who would suffer greatly. Many believe that final vision was fulfilled on May 13, 1981, the very day John Paul II was shot in St. Peter's Square. He later credited Our Lady of Fatima with saving his life and, in gratitude, offered the very bullet that pierced his body to be placed in the crown of her statue. Now fast forward to Civitavecchia. On September 19, 1995, in one of the many apparitions, the Virgin said, "Prepare yourselves to live what I had revealed to my little daughters in Fatima." It wasn't a nostalgic reference. It was a continuation. The same warnings: apostasy within the Church, the spiritual attack on the family, and looming global dangers, including nuclear war, were being delivered again. Only now they were clearer, more urgent, and unmistakably relevant to the modern world. According to Father Flavio Ubodi, the Virgin of Civitavecchia introduced herself with new titles: the Queen of Families and the Madonna of the Roses, Her focus was on protecting families, the foundation of society, and calling them to be consecrated to her Immaculate Heart. This was not just about individual piety, it was a call to spiritual defense in a time of chaos. John Paul II saw in these messages the final extension of Fatima's prophetic arc. A last invitation to return to God before the mantle of grace would be lifted, making way for divine justice. Even the statue itself echoed Fatima. In addition to bleeding tears, it reportedly exuded fragrant oil, especially on key liturgical feast days. These signs, according to the Grigori family, were not mere curiosities. They were meant to show the living presence of Christ and his mother, still among us. John Paul II, who had already consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary in both 1982 and again in 1984, believed Civitavecchia confirmed what Fatima had promised: the triumph of Mary's heart, but only after immense tribulation. And yet, despite the overwhelming devotion, the scientific validation, and the quiet acknowledgement from a sainted pope, the Church has never officially approved the apparitions of Civitavecchia. Nor has it condemned them. Why the hesitation? The answer lies in the Church's tradition of prudence. Catholic teaching holds that Marian apparitions, however dramatic, are private revelations. They don't add to public revelation, nor are they necessary for salvation. But they can serve as spiritual wake-up calls, urging the faithful toward conversion. And in the case of Civitavecchia, that wake-up call might be louder and more urgent than we want to admit. But what exactly did those prophetic messages say? And why have they been quietly kept from the public for so long? We'll dive into the hidden messages of the Madonna of Civitavecchia and the spiritual battle they reveal. Are you ready to hear what the world wasn't meant to know? If Civitavecchia truly was the continuation of Fatima, then the question becomes, why hasn't the Church fully embraced it? The answer takes us deep into the complex tension between belief, bureaucracy, and the burden of truth. While miracles and apparitions have stirred Catholic hearts for centuries, the Church approaches each with extreme caution. Authenticity requires time, prayer, and rigorous discernment. In the case of Civitavecchia, the Diocesan Commission, led by Bishop Girolamo Grillo and theologian Father Flavio Ubodi, conducted a thorough investigation. Their conclusion? The weeping of the statue was scientifically unexplainable. No trickery, no chemical explanation, just mystery. And here's the twist. Bishop Grillo, who initially dismissed the claims with skepticism, underwent a powerful personal transformation. After witnessing the statue weep directly into his hands, he became one of the most vocal defenders of the phenomenon. But not everyone shared his conviction. Within the Vatican itself, there was hesitation, even resistance. Some high-ranking prelates feared that any official endorsement of the apparitions might ignite theological controversy or reopen post-Second Vatican Council divisions. Others worried it would provoke sensationalism, especially because the messages carried themes of apostasy, scandal, and internal corruption within the Church. As Father Ubodi later revealed, someone inside the Vatican blocked the path to official recognition, despite Pope John Paul II's deep personal devotion to the Madonna of Civitavecchia. But the Church, in its subtle and symbolic language, still responded, just not with declarations, but with actions. In 1995, the statue was enthroned in the parish church of St. Augustine. A year later, Bishop Grillo consecrated the diocese to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. And in 2014, Bishop Luigi Marucci publicly crowned the statue, an act traditionally reserved for approved Marian images. According to Catholic tradition, these gestures are not random. They are considered tacit acceptance, acknowledging the spiritual significance of the phenomenon without formal approval. And John Paul II, he didn't wait for bureaucratic green lights. He acted from the heart. His devotion to the Madonna of Civitavecchia wasn't just personal, it was prophetic. For him, this wasn't about local miracles. It was a global message, a warning from heaven to the universal church. But what exactly was the message? According to Father Ubodi, who compiled the 95 messages received by the Grigori family, the Virgin's words were both a cry of love and a cry of urgency. She identified herself as the Madonna of the Roses and the Queen of Families, pleading with humanity to repent, to pray the Rosary, and to consecrate themselves to her Immaculate Heart. The themes were painfully clear. On July 16, 1995, the Virgin warned that Satan was targeting families, trying to dismantle them, because the family is the cornerstone of society. Satan wants to destroy families, she said, urging the faithful to defend marriage and life with courage. Then, on September 8, 1995, she spoke of a great apostasy, a spiritual darkness creeping over the Church itself. She called on bishops to stand with the Pope, to protect the true faith from distortion and decay. The warnings grew even graver: dangers for Italy, threats of global war, even nuclear conflict. Yet through it all, her message was not of despair, but of hope. My Immaculate Heart will triumph, but only after tribulations. She didn't ask for grand gestures or complex theology. She asked for conversion, for trust in the sacraments, especially Eucharist and confession, and for a return to humility and love. According to Father Ubodi, these were not new ideas. They were Fatima's messages revisited, but with a sharper tone, a renewed urgency, as if the Virgin were saying, "You didn't listen then. Will you listen now?" And Pope John Paul II, he listened. Everything he had lived, his near-death experience in 1981, his battle with communism, his consecration of Russia, had primed his heart to recognize the voice of Mary when she spoke again. At Fatima, she had pleaded for Russia's conversion and warned of future persecution. At Civitavecchia, the message widened. The entire world was now at risk. Even the Church itself was in danger. To John Paul II, Civitavecchia wasn't a standalone event. It was part of a divine strategy, a prophetic call, a final chapter in the Marian warnings of the 20th century. But what happened to those 95 messages? And why have many of them never been released in full? The Virgin Mary, in the eyes of John Paul II, was not speaking to some distant past. She was speaking directly to us, to the modern Church, warning of a deepening crisis of faith and pleading for urgent spiritual renewal. And the Pope responded, not with press conferences or declarations, but through quiet, sacred gestures, the whispered prayers before the little statue, the private crowning, the act of entrusting everything to her Immaculate Heart. These weren't just personal devotions. They were acts of obedience, a humble answer to a divine call, even in the face of internal resistance within the very Church he led. There was also the mysterious message given to young Jessica Grigori. According to some sources, it echoed the themes of the Third Secret of Fatima, reinforcing John Paul's belief that something far greater was unfolding, something too sacred, perhaps too troubling, to reveal in full. Though the exact content of that message remains hidden, whispers suggest it spoke of the suffering of the Church and the desperate need for unity around the Pope in a time of unprecedented spiritual warfare. John Paul II had lived that prophecy. He was the bishop dressed in white. He had walked through the valley of death, survived an assassination attempt, and offered that bullet back to Mary. He knew this wasn't coincidence. Civitavecchia was a sign, a warning, a roadmap, a final chance. Now, 3 decades later, can we still afford to dismiss it? Look around. The very things the Madonna warned about are happening now. The family, once the heartbeat of society, is under siege. Marriage is diluted. Birth rates are collapsing. Confusion reigns over truth and identity. And in the church, fractures run deep, doctrinal, spiritual, generational. But perhaps the most chilling of all, her warning about nuclear war. At the time, it seemed far-fetched. Now, it feels terrifyingly close. Tensions are escalating. Nations rattle their sabers. The shadow of global conflict looms once again. Was she warning us not just about Russia, but about the whole world? For John Paul II, Civitavecchia was not the end of the Marian story. It was the culmination, a final act in a century of heavenly interventions. And though the official Third Secret of Fatima was published in 2000, many believe a portion remains unrevealed. A part the Pope carried in silence. Jessica's letter, the hidden messages, the tears of blood, all of it points to a truth too heavy for words, yet too important to ignore. So what did the Madonna of Civitavecchia truly ask of us? She didn't speak in riddles. She called us to pray the rosary daily, to convert our hearts, to return to the sacraments, and to consecrate ourselves, our families, our nations to her immaculate heart. She made a promise to, "My immaculate heart will triumph." But she also gave a condition, only if we respond. John Paul II showed us how. He listened when others doubted. He believed when others feared. He entrusted himself, quietly and completely, to Mary. And now it's our turn. As the world trembles under the weight of its own pride and chaos, the Madonna of Civitavecchia still waits, still weeps, still whispers, "Are you ready to respond?" Let her warning not fall on deaf ears. Take up your rosary. Entrust your life to her immaculate heart. Join Mary's mission. Because as she said in one of her final messages, after the sorrowful years of Satan's darkness, the years of the triumph of my immaculate heart are imminent. But time is short, and the choice is yours. If this story moved your heart, if it awakened something in your soul, leave a like, share this video, and subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories that stir faith and call us to deeper truth. And now, tell us in the comments, do you believe the message of the Madonna of Civitavecchia is being fulfilled in our time? And more than ever, pray the rosary for peace in the world and peace in the church.